Good morning. I visited Calvary Cemetery in Anoka, Minnesota. The cemetery does contain over 4,000 burial sites and is divided into 9 sections. As you enter the cemetery, you're greeted by a granite cross, which is the only really overt symbol, evidence that you would have that it is maintained by the Catholic Church. Um, I did try to find out that if only Catholics could be buried in the cemetery, and I was unable to find that information, and the church hasn't contacted me. However, the gravestones themselves don't really answer the question because um, it's probably primarily uh, traditional Christian crosses that you would see on the grave sites that do contain Christian symbols. Um, there were no Catholic crucifixes or any other evidence that uh, that it was all Catholic. In fact, there was only a couple of uh, Catholic images in the cemetery itself. A couple of the grave sites did have a statue of the Virgin Mary, but the majority of them did not. Um, and the columbarium, which is one of the more elaborate parts of the cemetery, which columbarium derives from the Italian word columba, and it translates to dove, and it differs from a mausoleum, although it has similar build, just on a much smaller scale. Um, the difference is that it contains cremated remains as opposed to full body remains. There were 5 towers in the columbarium. Each one had roughly 120 to 130 vertical um, cremation units for people to place the cremated remains of family. And each one of those towers did have, the outer towers had a um, Catholic saint on each one: St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke, and St. John. But again, the gravestones themselves either had no Christian symbology or um, they had what you would consider a Christian cross and scripture from the New Testament on the gravestones. The earlier sections, there are 9 sections. In the earlier sections, obviously it progresses from older to newer. And the older sections, 1 through 3 or 4, I believe it was, had death and birth dates that began and ended in the 1800s. Um, you did progress when you reached sections 7, 8, and 9, that the majority were born in the 1900s, um, and deaths as late as 2015 was the latest death that I observed. The earlier sections contained larger and more elaborate headstones. They had very intricate carving, and some had large crosses carved on top. Um, and it was a mixture of flat and raised headstones, but the elaborate nature of those headstones did decrease as you progressed into earlier, or later and later time periods. Um, Although there were more raised headstones than there were flat headstones in the newer sections as well. The lack of the elaborate nature of the headstones is probably a reflection of both the economy and the relative cost percentage wise of having a gravestone that big and that elaborate, and probably also because the emphasis on the importance of an elaborate funerary practice is probably greater in the earlier time period than they are now. And as you progress through the sections, there became fewer and fewer religious symbols on the gravestones. That's also a reflection of modern society in Minnesota, where um, The area is predominantly Lutheran and Catholic, with some evangelical denominations sprinkled in as well. Um, but now the majority of Minnesotans, that's over 60%, don't identify with any particular religion. Um, the culture has definitely changed a little, and you can see that in the graveyard. The majority of the graves are still um, predominantly European, Caucasian peoples, but I did start to see a few non-native, non-Europeans, primarily Hispanic and Somalian, that were buried in the cemetery, but that number was still very, very low, which does reflect um, the ethnic and racial makeup of the area around Anoka, which is predominantly Caucasian and Protestant, if not secular, or mostly non-religious. The cemetery itself, the sections seem to be smaller the further you go into the sections. I don't know if that's because they're running out of land, or just because maybe the funeral practices have changed a little bit, and as much room is not needed, or potentially caskets or crypts aren't nearly as large as they used to be. All in all, the cemetery is definitely reflective of the culture, the economy, and of the religious makeup of Minnesota. Thank you. Have a good day.